Hi, so before I start, I want to state that this is in no way whatsoever like a hateful video or me like bashing this show or saying that I hate it or anything like that. I have a tattoo, literally, so it's something I think that most people in this day and age really lose track of, especially with our lives being so influenced by the internet and being so chronically online 24/7. I think a lot of people really forget that you can be a huge fan of something while also recognizing its flaws, and that to me is what it really means to be like a fan of a certain media. Because if I were to sit here and say that I loved every single thing about rwby, some people would be like, are we watching the same show? Because you cannot put out art without expecting criticism for it, and that goes for literally anything. You are opening yourself up to a world of critiques and advice whenever you put something out there, and I feel like that's what you have to expect, and if you don't, then that's kind of a you problem. So with that being said, I just want to clarify that like I'm not part of the hatedom or whatever. Don't associate me with that at all. This show has been my lifesaver since I was 13, and it's something that I've grown really passionate about, so I wanted to sort of like, basically what I'm saying is I'm tired of sitting in my room thinking about it over and over again without having an outlet to share all my thoughts. So that's what I'm doing here. So with all that being said, I wanted to highlight something that has kind of stuck out to me over the years that I've been a fan of rwby, and that is the portrayal, or I guess in this case, for this video's lack thereof, of mental health / mental illness. So I'm going to be examining a few like specific examples and later like examples as a whole, and then discussing what went wrong as well as what I would have personally done to fix it. Also, just again, I'm not a mental health professional, but I am a writer, so I know kind of how to write things. I like to think that. This is not me nitpicking, it's me pointing out certain critiques and how I would handle it. So I want to start off with perhaps the worst example, which would be Yang as a character. rwby as a show itself takes like a noticeably darker turn in volume 3, and I think that goes without saying. Any viewer that you ask, you'll be like, what was like the statement point of this show? What was like the turning point? Everyone's gonna say volume 3. It kind of leaves like the feel-good energy and like the lightheartedness behind as we get like further and further into the volume. It goes without saying that one of the most important parts of this volume, and probably of the show as a whole, is Yang getting her arm severed. So this event itself will like change her character for the rest of the series, or we all thought it would. So after this, she, understandably falls into a depression. This is displayed in her short-tempered attitude towards her sister and how she essentially isolates herself from her family. Also pretty obvious that she's experiencing some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder after, literally having a part of your body cut off, which is an appropriate reaction to such a traumatizing event. This is where I start having my issues. The PTSD is like barely touched on. And you might ask yourself, well,
why would anyone want to watch something that's like distressing and traumatizing and watch someone go through that?
Well, you can't write in some extremely traumatizing event for a certain character and then not touch on it whatsoever. I want to mention that there's maybe 1 or 2 scenes where she has like a panic attack or like a flashback here and there throughout volume 4, but other than that, that's it. And PTSD as a mental disorder itself is so much more than those 2 symptoms. Some other experiences include lapses in memory, mostly specific to the said traumatic event, severe anxiety, hypervigilance, self-destructive behavior, and a lot more. Not to mention the fact that she literally lost her arm, and the physical trauma surrounding that is not touched on whatsoever. And there are so many effects of losing a limb, such as like phantom pains, fatigue, mobility and dexterity issues, muscle contractures, etc. I want you to think to yourself when that was ever elaborated on throughout the show. If you thought never, then you're right. They just sort of gave her a new arm and pretended like everything solved. Okay, here's where I start having really, really big issues. So a few weeks later in canon, she's like laughing about it. Personally, if I lost my arm and was like permanently disabled by it for the rest of my life, I don't think you'd catch me making jokes about it. I get that everybody has different ways of processing trauma and grief, but right after that, the next and most recent, oddly, time that her PTSD is touched on is in Volume 6, when she has a sudden flashback to the fall of Beacon. Her hand is trembling, and she even rejects the comfort that Blake offers her. So as someone myself who struggles with PTSD, I actually thought that this scene was done pretty well. I just, wish they had incorporated more scenes like this throughout the series. This one isn't really a critique because I thought it was done well. I thought it was like accurate, I guess, for myself at least. Really wish that they had, kind of kept this going, because you can tell that they kind of improved the writing from Volume 4 to Volume 6. Volume 6 being the best volume in the show, naturally. Why did her mental health issues suddenly disappear after that? I don't know. I feel like, in conclusion, for her character, I feel like Ruby could have done such a better job with tackling such an intense mental illness. She went through something that was supposed to have a lasting effect on her character, yet is sort of seen as almost an afterthought throughout the show, especially as the plot progresses. And if I were in charge of writing this part of her character, I would have shown both the mental and physical effects of this mental disorder, as well as the physical trauma of losing your arm. Okay, sorry that was a mess, kind of all over the place. I have a lot of thoughts. It'll get better. Alright, so for the next topic, I didn't really write anything down because I feel like I'd be sitting in front of my computer for hours. I want to talk about the elephant in the room and probably what we're all thinking about, and I didn't start with this because I knew I would be here forever, and that is Ruby's S word. I can't say it because YouTube will take this video down, but I could make a whole video about her character herself and how the show absolutely massacred her, figuratively and literally. Anyway, I'm gonna try to keep it tame for the purpose of this. So before we focus on what actually transpired, we gotta look backwards a little bit. Starting around, I want to say Volume 7, Ruby starts having a decline in her mental health, and this is pretty obvious to the people that were watching, because I remember watching this volume, I think specifically towards the end, definitely, and everyone pointing out how she was gonna snap one day, and how we were all literally counting down the days until she did. So, and then in Volume 9, she did kind of lose her shit on everybody, and it was relatively underwhelming. I said it. I was actually sitting on a tour bus in Germany when I watched this episode. I don't know why I felt the need to say that. I was kind of disappointed. She has some valid points, the memes that came after it were hilarious. I kind of expected a little more, but I'm not here to complain about that. I'm here to talk about the events that followed. The reaction to her kind of losing her shit on everybody was so terribly handled. Why was a grown man yelling at a 17-year-old? What was that about? We'll get to him. Especially the whole, she could have just talked to us. Except, I don't know, she couldn't. Yeah, that really pissed me off. The whole, oh my god, well, how was I supposed to know anything was wrong when she could have just talked to us? Are you serious? My big issue was the terrible writing and handling of, S word. Again, I can't say it. You can for sure write darker subjects and darker topics. There is a wrong way and a right way to do it. This was the wrong way. I'm sorry, the whole messaging of, oh my god, the world would be so much better without you in it, what? And kind of offering, S word as an option. Ever feel like giving up or everything else is too much, you can always yourself. That's what it felt like to me, honestly. I mean, it's literally offered as an option, and she takes it. No, I don't really see why that was necessary as a whole, or why the whole S word as a subplot makes any sense whatsoever. And then the reaction afterwards is even worse. I didn't think it could get any worse, but it did. I'm sitting here speechless because I don't have any words. I don't, thinking about it is like taxing my brain cells. The whole way, the entire way, nobody in that room shed a single tear was ridiculous. If I died and I found out that my sister went up and hugged the grown-ass man who drove me to do it, I would come back from the dead and kill myself again. Full stop. The only real bitch in that room was Weiss. Period. They could have been handled so much. They acted like they did not care whatso fucking ever. Oh, and then afterwards, can we talk about how she literally walked it off? I ended my life, but I came back and I'm like really strong now and everything's fine. That's not, girly, that is not how it works. I could go on and on and on about that, but there's a few more things I want to get to, such as, and this is one that I don't really see anybody mention whatsoever, and that's Team Juniper as a whole team. Apparently, I've noticed that like Jean is the only one allowed to grieve Pyrrha's death. Whenever she's brought up in a conversation, literally all about him. All the fucking time, and it is exhausting. You have 2 other teammates who just lost their friend as well. Can we focus on that? God forbid. Because they're not allowed to grieve because they weren't madly in love with her. Maybe they were, I don't know. Also, grief isn't something that you just simply get over. Hot take. Oh my god, they built a statue for her. I suddenly don't feel that bad anymore. Get over yourself. And that kind of like segues into like the whole fall of Beacon as a whole and how everyone sort of acts unfazed by it. I'm pretty sure 2 entire teams who competed in the tournament actually died. Like, it was mentioned in one of the books, I don't quite remember. I think it was like Team Bronze and Team Auburn died. Dead. All 8 of them. Dead. Why are we acting like the fall of Beacon never happened? Ironically, actually, Ironwood is the only person to show any symptoms of PTSD from this moment. That's odd. I think that's very, very odd how such a pivotal moment in the show kind of goes unnoticed. Yeah, like it happens and then we don't have time to grieve, we don't have time to do this or that, or really like focus on it. We have to stop Salem, whatever. My thing with all of this, I know that this video has been a bit of a mess. I've never made a video essay video before, so I'm sorry, is that like you cannot write darker subjects or sensitive material and then have zero like elaboration on it after it happens. You know what I mean? I know that there is limited time in a show and limited resources to do things, but if you are going to write such heavy topics that can literally influence characters for the rest of the show, please show that. And lastly, I save this one for last because I am not the most educated on this topic, and I know that no matter how much research I do, I'll never be as educated and as accurate as people who experience this, and I want to talk about Klein for a second. And when someone pointed this out to me, my jaw physically hit the floor. Klein is based off of the Seven Dwarfs, Snow White, and he kind of like switches back between different like personalities of them, and that, people pointed out, is oh my god, so problematic because it's basically a really, really terribly done, wouldn't even call it representation, mockery of DID, dissociative identity disorder. DID is a disorder in which the mind kind of, I'm gonna get this wrong, I'm so sorry, splits into different fragments called alters, and this is due to severe childhood trauma. And the media portraying DID has had a very terrible rap because if you look at movies like Split, it's bad and it's not accurate, and many people with DID have come out and said that these representations are not accurate and that it makes their lives worse because it creates so much stigma. And I feel like that's really what Ruby did with this. They absolutely massacred this portrayal. I'm using quotations because I don't even want to call it that because it's so bad. I wanted to point that out, and I think that's all I really had to say for this video. Is just that I feel like mental health being portrayed in the show really kind of goes downhill, and I feel like research is just as important as representation. And if you want to portray darker topics in your work, you need to do proper research on it and appropriately include it where it is necessary. So apologies for how awkward and all over the place this video was, but I had a lot of thoughts, and thank you for watching.